Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to why Americans are obsessed with big cars. I have done reactions before when like car sizes and stuff has been mentioned, and generally it makes sense that the US would have, people would have bigger cars, trucks and stuff, because the roads are much wider, much bigger. And like, for example, in the UK, if you have a massive car, some streets will just sort of be a lot harder to navigate through because of the size and the width, and yeah, just the streets are not really built in the UK to have big cars. Motorways, yeah, that's fine, but I mean, in certain cities and villages and stuff, the streets do get quite narrow. But we're going to check this out, hopefully going to enjoy. Let's see, I guess, why this is the case. It probably will get into what I've already said, but maybe there's other reasons as well. And yeah, let's jump into this.
Americans love big cars.
Big cars they're fun, they're roomy. I mean, this thing, when you go down the road in it, people notice it.
The US
Is this
is
a
the
big
country
car?
of...
I guess lengthwise it is. When I'm thinking of big cars, I'm thinking of like just trucks and stuff that are high up. Again, probably the same width and lengthwise as this, but just a lot higher up. But I guess in the grand scheme of things, this car is very long. So it is definitely considered a big car, but it's a two-seater, isn't it? Unless there's actually two seats at the back. Maybe there's two at the back. Actually, no, it is a five-seater because there's literally doors here. But I've never really seen a car like this before, to be honest. I couldn't actually say how long it actually is.
Cadillacs with massive tail fins and oversized pickup trucks.
That's what I'm thinking of.
We are all about wide open spaces here, and we drive big cars because we can.
Compared with Europe or countries like Japan, the market for bigger cars in America is just, well, bigger. In Europe, for example, small cars like city cars, subcompacts, and compact cars made up more than 35% of sales in 2021. In the US, the same three segments made up just over 10% of sales. Consumer demand has driven automakers to make vehicles bigger and bigger. Regulatory loopholes favoring trucks, say some industry analysts, have helped the shift. Big cars are more expensive, often much more, and especially if they burn gasoline, more harmful to the environment. They take up more space on the road and in parking lots. They are also much more fatal in car accidents.
Our current system of regulating safety of vehicles is not providing a check on the weight of vehicles and the disparity of weight across the fleet.
CNBC looked into America's obsession with big cars and why it matters.
I didn't think we were getting into this aspect of things. I thought it was just why they're obsessed with them. Okay. Yeah, this man is a car collector.
This car is huge. It's almost 20 feet.
20
Why
feet.
are they so big?
Because they could be. Gas was a quarter when this car was made. Who cared what the gas mileage was? And we wanted comfort, and we wanted style, and we wanted space.
This is Rick Payton. He is a General Motors loyalist. He loves Cadillacs, and especially Cadillacs from the brand's heyday in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. At that time, big cars meant something similar to what they mean today: luxury, comfort, and status. Driving a lumbering Cadillac or Lincoln Continental signified that you are a person living the good life.
My aunt had a '79 Coupe de Ville, and I remember that car as a kid and fondly remember it.
He has two classic Cadillacs and a Buick in his garage in Eau Claire, Wisconsin,
I wonder how much this car costs right now.
and several more such cars in a shop a few towns away.
Damn.
This is a Cadillac Eldorado. This was the king of the heap in '55. So this was the most expensive car they made. This is the second most expensive car they made in '55. This is a '55 Fleetwood. So cool things about this. Where would you put gas in this car?
What? No way. That is crazy.
Car's about probably 19 feet something.
Yeah, you can see from this angle it is very long. Again, maybe that was just the style in this in the 50s and 60s, etc.
His collection shows the American obsession with big vehicles stretches back decades. Cars such as his Cadillac Fleetwood were the most desirable rides of their day.
This was the king of the heap. I mean, they didn't make a more luxurious car in the United States in 1961 than this. This is one of the biggest cars that you could buy at the time. This was the SUV of the day. This is the closest representation of what an Escalade is back then.
Size creep.
Ed Kim runs Auto Pacific, which conducts surveys and other research for automakers, suppliers, and others in the auto industry.
One of the things that researchers commonly ask is, what size of vehicle do you want next time? And there will almost always be a significant number of people that say, I want something bigger next time.
Customers express preferences for bigger vehicles. Automakers respond to that. Take, for example, the BMW 3 Series, an iconic performance sedan. When it was first introduced, it was far smaller than it is today.
A lot of people kind of consider the E36 generation, which came out in the early 90s, to kind of be the ideal embodiment of what a 3 Series should be. But it just kept getting bigger, to the point where now it's not so far off from what the 5 Series was not that long ago.
Kim says that this kind of size creep, where automakers bulk up a specific model over time, might result from misinterpreting survey data.
Automakers take that data very literally and take that to mean, okay, we need to make the next generation of this vehicle bigger. And then because automakers always benchmark each other automakers end up doing the same and they make their vehicles bigger, and the cycle goes on and on and on.
Researchers at Consumer Reports have found evidence of size creep, especially among pickup trucks. The group found that the hood height of passenger trucks, such as the top-selling Ford F-150, the Chevrolet Silverado, and even mid-sized trucks, has increased by an average of 11% since the year 2000. New pickup trucks grew 24% heavier on average from 2000 to 2018.
Damn.
On some of these what they call heavy-duty trucks, like the Ford F-250, the 2500 series Ram and Silverado, the front edge of that hood is now 55 inches or more off the ground, and that's as tall as the roof of some sedans.
The reintroduced Ford Ranger is bigger than the outgoing version that was discontinued in 2011. In fact, when Ford dropped the old Ranger in 2011, it said it did so because not enough people were buying small trucks to keep producing it.
It isn't necessarily that trucks themselves are getting bigger. It's more that when a bigger option is available, more customers buy it.
SUVs, crossovers, and pickup trucks now dominate car sales. Some researchers say that regulations have incentivized automakers to make bigger vehicles. Kate Whitefoot is a researcher who has studied emissions rules. She says that when the government started regulating fuel efficiency in the 1970s, rules didn't take into account the size of the vehicles an automaker sold. But a lot of companies importing into the US market were selling smaller cars that by nature burned less fuel. So in the early 2000s, new regulations introduced what is called a footprint-based standard.
That meant that automakers that sold larger vehicles could meet less stringent regulations, and that was built out of this desire to kind of protect the US-based automakers and fairly distribute impacts across the different automakers.
That created an incentive to build larger vehicles in three ways. One is that the standards themselves are based on the sizes of vehicles that automakers are producing. The more large vehicles they produce, the lower the regulatory target they have to hit is. That in itself can create an incentive to shift toward larger vehicles. Secondly, the revised rules split vehicles into two categories: passenger cars and light trucks, which includes SUVs and pickup trucks.
If a vehicle is classified as a light truck, then it also has less stringent regulations compared to if it was classified as a passenger car.
Lastly, if a vehicle is big enough, it doesn't fall under the rules at all. It is no longer considered a light-duty vehicle. It is now considered a heavy truck. Whitefoot and fellow researchers did a study in 2011 that basically predicted the repercussions of such laws.
When we evaluate those trade-offs, does this incentive exist under these regulations for automakers to increase the size of their vehicles? And we did see that it could under quite a large set of scenarios.
While the overall size and weight of the fleet haven't changed all that much, they have taken off in certain segments, especially in pickup trucks. Since the mid-1990s, pickup truck weight on average has increased over 1,000 pounds.
What? And they're already big as they are. So does this mean just pickup trucks in general in the US are just bigger than pickup trucks that will be used in other countries? Because I just sort of assumed the sort of cars that were used in the US would just typically be bigger cars, but maybe in those actual specific cars as well, their versions are also bigger, which is really interesting. But obviously with the explanations here, it makes sense. It's just interesting how this has all sort of led to how it is now, how it compares.
Research has found that in the event of a crash, a 1,000 pound increase in weight increases the chance of a fatality by 40 to 50%.
The problem is that other people on the road can't choose how big the vehicles around them are. They also can sometimes create situations where a crash that may have been avoidable isn't as avoidable. So we found that some trucks have front blind spots that are 11 feet longer than in some sedans and 7 feet longer than in a lot of popular SUVs.
We've seen like what we call an arms race in vehicle size and weight, because if I'm concerned about my own safety, I'm just concerned about, is my vehicle bigger and heavier than other vehicles around me? And so vehicles, as a result, get larger and larger and larger because people just want to outcompete each other.
Big cars tend to be more expensive than small ones.
We've seen median transaction prices rise pretty considerably over the last few years. Part of that is due to the simple fact that small entry-level vehicles have increasingly been disappearing from US showrooms.
Automakers are axing small models. The Toyota Yaris is gone from the US. Ford discontinued just about all its passenger cars, including its Focus and Fiesta.
Wow.
Chevrolet got rid of the Sonic and the Cruze. The Hyundai Accent and Kia Rio are on their way out.
Damn.
The Nissan Versa sells just a fraction of what it used to. And that applies for entire brands specializing in small cars, like Fiat. They have left the US entirely. Meanwhile, Fiat's American sister brands, Ram and Jeep, have become tremendously successful, selling some of the most popular vehicles available today, big SUVs and pickup trucks. While small cars are tough to sell in much of the US, they are still popular where roads are too narrow, gas is too pricey, and parking too scarce to justify hulking pickups or SUVs. But SUVs are seeing serious growth in Europe too.
Okay.
Analysis from Jado Dynamics has found that in 2018, about 30% of new cars registered were SUVs. In 2021, that number had reached nearly 40%. That popularity comes at the expense of small cars, which have gone from 49% of share in 2018 to about 42% in 2021. That trend has continued in the first half of 2022.
So it's a consistent thing then. It's not just the US. I guess the US is just ahead with it.
There's a possibility that the rise of electric vehicles could change all this. Electric powertrains take up a lot less space in cars than do internal combustion engines. With more interior space, some industry analysts say it is possible Americans will seek out smaller cars simply because new EV vehicle designs will make better use of a car's total footprint. Tastes change too, even after decades of obsession. Peyton has lately developed a fascination with small, agile British cars. He bought a 1961 MG-A, which is dwarfed by the size of his Cadillac.
I've always flirted with British cars. They're interesting. They look at a different way to do it.
American GIs became obsessed with cars like these during World War II. That obsession unnerved American car makers enough to prompt the creation of a new generation of smaller, more agile American cars, such as the Corvette, the Ford Thunderbird, and eventually the Ford Mustang, each a legend in its own right.
The whole start of the Americans' love affair with the automobile and sports cars, that all came out of English cars.
Well, there we go. There we go. Did they just copy them then? I mean, I hear Corvette and stuff. I mean, they're big boy cars. So I just had to put that in. The dilemma is people buy big cars for safety from people driving big cars. It's a vicious cycle. I mean, that's how I sort of view it. I don't drive, but my sort of thought process is when I do drive, I want to have a big car because you're more or less, your chances of being hit on the road, I mean, not chances, you getting hit on the road is more or less down to other people, unless you are genuinely just dumb as hell and you're not capable of driving safely. Your whole life is on the people on the road around you. So if you have a bigger car, you just feel a bit more safe and a bit more security. So that's my sort of thought process. I would rather have a bigger car because a smaller one, again, you could be the best driver in the world, but you got some idiot who crashes into you, and there you go. So don't really blame people for this thought process. You didn't even mention how much more deadly pickups and SUVs are to pedestrians. The weight, height of the hood, and ridiculous blind spots. That's true, but I guess if someone's going to be hit by a car anyway, I mean, actually, I guess it does have its. It does actually. It is quite important for that, because say you're getting hit at speeds that are not too fast. Let's say 20 miles per hour. You're still going to cause damage to people, and maybe it's probably worse than I'm actually thinking right now. But I guess that's when size will play a massive role. Because if you're going to get hit by a car at 50 miles per hour, you're probably going to have the same injuries from any car. I mean, if you get hit at 50 miles per hour by a bike, you're probably done for. If you get hit in the right place. But yes, I guess it has its. Yeah, that's a fair point. But I guess it's also at a certain point where you're done for anyway. That's one way to put it. My theory is a little different. I just assumed people were buying bigger cars because they just kept getting fatter and fatter. For God's sake. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this reaction. Let me know your thoughts on this. Are you a big car man yourself? And yeah, that's pretty much it. Until next time, like, subscribe. Peace.